The champagne had been a mistake. That was my only defense for what I was about to do. Evelyn, you can't be serious. My friend Charlotte's voice cut through the haze of expensive alcohol and bad decisions, her grip on my forearm bordering on pain. Her diamond bracelet pressed into my skin through the thin silk of my dress. Do you have any idea who he is? I didn't. That was precisely the point. Kiss the most dangerous man at this impossibly lavish party. Walk away with $300. Prove to Charlotte and the rest of our social circle that I wasn't the controlled, predictable friend who color-coded her calendar and never missed a deadline. Never broke a rule. Never took a risk. Never lived. 26 years old, and I'd spent every single one of them being careful, planning, making the safe choice. Watching life unfold for other people while I observed from behind spreadsheets and sensible decisions. Tonight was supposed to change that. The party existed in a realm I'd only glimpsed in magazines, a penthouse that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 lifetimes, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the glittering city below like a painting made of stars. Crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across marble that gleamed like ice. Women draped in designer gowns that cost more than my car payment moved through the space with the fluid grace of people who'd never questioned whether they belonged anywhere. Men in custom suits spoke in low voices about deals and acquisitions, their watches catching the light with every gesture. Charlotte's fiancé had secured our invitations through some business connection he'd been deliberately vague about. An opportunity, he'd said with that smile that meant he wasn't telling the whole truth, to see how real wealth operates, to drink their champagne and observe their rituals. $300, I reminded Charlotte, though my voice wavered slightly. That's my grocery budget for 6 weeks. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. It's not worth dying over. Charlotte's perfectly manicured nails dug deeper into my arm. That man isn't just some wealthy stranger, Evelyn. Look at him. Really, look. I had been looking. For the past 30 minutes, I'd been watching him from across the room, building courage glass by glass. He stood near the bar with a tumbler of what appeared to be expensive scotch, engaged in conversation with 2 men in suits that screamed old money. But even surrounded by wealth and power, even flanked by men who clearly wielded influence, he dominated the space in a way that had nothing to do with his bank account. Tall, easily 6'3", with shoulders that strained against his tailored light blue suit. The color shouldn't have worked. Too soft for a man who radiated that much intensity, but somehow it made him more striking. Dark hair styled with just enough precision to suggest control without sacrificing edge. Olive skin. Even from this distance, I could trace the line of stubble along his sharp jaw, the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers or warning posters. But it was the details that caught my attention. The tattoos climbing his throat like dark vines, visible even in the formal setting, disappearing beneath his collar in patterns that suggested stories I'd never be brave enough to ask about. More ink covered his hands, intricate designs that emerged from his cuffs when he lifted his glass, and the way people moved around him, creating space without seeming to realize they were doing it. The way the 2 men he spoke with stood at deferential angles, like courtiers before royalty. The way his dark eyes tracked the room with predatory precision, missing nothing. He looked like violence wrapped in silk and good breeding, like danger wearing a watch that cost more than my student loans. He's perfect, I said, ignoring every warning signal firing in my brain. The champagne had drowned my usual caution, replacing careful calculation with something reckless and hungry. He's exactly the kind of man who would never expect someone like me to approach him. Evelyn, I'm doing this. I downed the rest of my champagne, the bubbles scorching down my throat, and thrust my clutch into Charlotte's hands. Watch my things. I moved before logic could reassert itself, weaving through clusters of designer dresses and expensive cologne with my pulse hammering in my throat. The closer I got, the more I noticed. The platinum cufflinks at his wrists, the signet ring on his right hand, heavy gold etched with symbols I couldn't decipher. The way his dark eyes swept the room with calculated awareness, cataloging threats and opportunities with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to survive in worlds polite society preferred to ignore. Those eyes found me when I was still 15 feet away. Dark, nearly black. They locked onto mine with an intensity that almost stopped my forward momentum. I watched something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe, or intrigue, as I continued moving toward him with more confidence than I possessed. The two men he'd been speaking with fell silent mid-sentence as I stepped into their orbit. Up close, he was devastating. Tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, even in heels. Built like someone who understood violence intimately, all controlled power beneath that perfectly tailored suit. His face was sharp angles and hard edges, saved from severity by a mouth that looked designed for either cruelty or pleasure, possibly both. And the danger radiating from him felt physical, like heat from a fire. Something in those midnight eyes that whispered he'd witnessed things most people couldn't imagine and done things they'd never survive knowing about. Hi. The word emerged steadier than I'd hoped, though my heart threatened to crack my ribs. I'm Evelyn. He studied me with the patience of a predator, his gaze traveling from my face down the length of my body in my blush pink satin dress, borrowed from Charlotte's closet because I owned nothing suitable for a party where the champagne probably cost more than my monthly rent. When his eyes returned to mine, they carried assessment, not lechery, cataloging, measuring. Dante, he said finally, his voice a low rumble textured with an accent I couldn't place. Italian maybe, or something older and more specific. And you are either remarkably brave or dangerously foolish, approaching me like this. Maybe both, I said, and was rewarded with the faintest curve of his lips. Not quite a smile, but close enough to feel like a victory. Excuse us. He spoke to the two men without looking at them, his attention remaining fixed on me. It wasn't a request. They dissolved into the crowd immediately, leaving us alone in a bubble of space despite the hundreds of people circulating through the penthouse. So, Evelyn. Dante's focus felt absolute, like being pinned beneath a microscope made of darkness and intensity. What brings a woman like you to a party like this? A woman like you. He'd identified me immediately as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in this ecosystem of wealth and carefully cultivated danger. I should have been insulted. Instead, I found it strangely reassuring that my borrowed confidence and rented elegance hadn't fooled anyone. My friend secured an invitation, I admitted. No point in constructing lies for someone who saw through surfaces with that kind of precision. And curiosity, I suppose. Wanted to see how the other half exists. And? He sipped his scotch, those dark eyes never releasing mine. Are you impressed? Intimidated is more accurate. Another truth, slipping past my usual filters thanks to champagne and proximity to someone who felt more real than anyone else in this curated fantasy. Everyone here looks like they were born understanding which fork to use and how to discuss market fluctuations at dinner parties. That almost smile appeared again, deeper this time. And you? I'm a financial analyst who meal preps on Sundays and owns exactly 3 professional dresses. I tilted my head, studying him the way he'd been studying me, emboldened by alcohol and the strange electricity humming between us. You're not what I expected. No? Something dangerous flickered in those midnight eyes. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more refined, I guess. The words emerged before wisdom could stop them, champagne loosening my tongue past the point of caution. You look like you'd be more comfortable in a street fight than at a charity gala. I watched his eyes widen fractionally, genuine surprise crossing his features before being replaced by something darker, more interesting, more alive. Perceptive, he said softly, stepping closer, erasing the already minimal distance between us into something that felt decidedly intimate for 2 strangers at a party. Most people here are too terrified to acknowledge what they see when they look at me. Should I be? The question came out breathier than intended, my heart racing as the space between us contracted to inches. Terrified? Probably. His voice dropped lower, rough velvet and dark promises. But you're not, are you? You're nervous, yes, but not afraid. Why? Because I was an idiot with too much champagne in my bloodstream and a dare burning in my pocket. Because standing this close to him made me feel electric in a way I'd never experienced. Like I'd spent my entire life sleeping and finally woken up. Because danger had never looked so appealing, wrapped in a light blue suit and eyes that saw everything I'd ever hidden. I think, I said slowly, my pulse thundering so loud I was certain he could hear it, that you're exactly the kind of dangerous I need right now. His eyes darkened further, and I knew with absolute certainty that he'd understood every layer of meaning beneath those words. The air between us charged with something I didn't have a name for, something that made my skin feel too tight and my breath too shallow. He set his glass down on a nearby table without looking, his attention never wavering from my face. "Do you have any idea?" Dante said, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow cutting through the noise of the party. "What happens to women who walk up to men like me and say things like that?" "No," I admitted, and it was the most honest thing I'd said all night. "But I'm about to find out." I closed the final inches between us and kissed him. It was supposed to be quick, a stunt, evidence for the dare, proof that I could be spontaneous and reckless and everything I'd never allowed myself to be. But the instant my lips touched his, the world tilted sideways. The kiss ignited something primal and consuming, champagne bubbles and gasoline meeting flame. His mouth was firm and warm and tasted like expensive scotch and dark promises. For a heartbeat, he remained still, shocked perhaps, and then his hand curved around the back of my neck with possessive certainty, and he deepened the kiss like he was claiming territory, marking boundaries, making declarations in a language I'd never learned but somehow understood perfectly. My hands found his chest, the fabric of his suit warm beneath my palms, his heart beating steady and strong while mine tried to escape my ribcage. Around us the party continued, but it felt distant, muffled, like we'd fallen into a pocket dimension where only this moment existed. When I finally pulled back, breathless and dizzy, I saw Charlotte's shocked face across the room. Saw the way other guests had paused mid-conversation, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips, eyes wide with something between fascination and horror. I'd done it. Kissed the most dangerous man at the party. Won the dare. Proved I could be reckless. I took a step backward, ready to collect my victory and disappear into the crowd before reality caught up with champagne courage. Dante's fingers closed around my wrist. Not painful, but absolute. Inescapable. He pulled me back against him, his mouth finding my ear, his voice a dark rumble that vibrated through my entire body. "We're not done yet, Evelyn." And in that instant, as his breath warmed my skin and his fingers pressed against my racing pulse, I realized three things simultaneously. I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd made the best decision of my life, and I was no longer anonymous in this world of wealth and danger. I was claimed, marked, noticed by a man who could destroy entire lives with a phone call. The party blurred around us. Charlotte's voice calling my name sounded like it was coming from underwater. Dante's hand remained around my wrist, his thumb tracing small circles against my pulse point. His eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made everything else disappear. "You don't know who I am," he said, statement not question, his accent wrapping around the words like smoke. "No," I whispered, because lying seemed pointless when he was touching me like this, looking at me like I was the only real thing in a room full of beautiful illusions. "Good." His smile was sharp and devastating, all edge and promise. "Let's keep it that way a little longer." And with his hand wrapped around my wrist and his dark eyes swallowing me whole, Evelyn Cross, the woman who planned everything, who never gambled, who never risked, stepped off the edge of the safe life she'd built and fell straight into the gravity of a man who could either catch her or let her shatter. She didn't know which terrified her more. She didn't know which she wanted more. She only knew that the kiss was supposed to be the ending. Instead, it was just the beginning. The dare had been simple. Clinical, even. Kiss a stranger, collect $300, prove I wasn't the woman who triple-checked her calendar before accepting dinner invitations. But nothing about Dante Bellini's mouth on mine felt simple. His kiss was a declaration of war wrapped in silk, possessive and consuming and utterly devastating. The hand at the back of my neck held me captive with gentle authority, while his other arm circled my waist, pulling me flush against him. I could feel the solid wall of his chest through layers of expensive fabric, the controlled strength in his frame, the heat radiating from his skin. Around us, the party continued its glittering charade, but the noise felt muffled, distant, like someone had wrapped us in soundproofing made of champagne bubbles and bad decisions. My hands fisted in his lapels, silk and wool crushed between my fingers, anchoring myself to something solid while the world spun beneath my feet. He tasted like aged scotch and dark promises, like every reckless choice I'd never allowed myself to make, distilled into a single moment. When he finally released my mouth, I was breathless and dizzy, my lipstick probably destroyed, my carefully constructed composure shattered into glittering fragments on the marble floor. Reality crashed back in waves, Charlotte's shocked expression across the room. The weight of 100 eyes watching us. The whispers start to ripple through clusters of designer gowns and tailored suits like wildfire through dry grass. I'd won the dare, kissed the most dangerous man at the party. Time to collect my victory and vanish before my champagne courage evaporated completely. I took one step backward. Dante's fingers closed around my wrist like a handcuff made of warm skin and absolute certainty. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice was low, rough, threaded with something between amusement and possession that made heat pool low in my stomach. My voice came out breathier than I'd intended. That was a dare. He studied me with those midnight eyes, his thumb finding my pulse point and pressing just hard enough to feel my heart hammering against his touch. "Your friend is watching. There's $300 involved. You thought you could kiss me and walk away like I was some conquest you could add to your list of spontaneous moments." He'd seen through everything, the dare, the performance, the carefully constructed rebellion. "Yes," I whispered, because lying seemed pointless when he was touching me like this, reading me like I was written in a language only he understood. Dante's smile was sharp and devastating, all edge and dark promise. He pulled me back against him, his mouth finding my ear, his breath warming my skin. "We're not done yet, Evelyn." The world tilted sideways. His hand slid from my wrist to my waist, possessive and certain, as if he'd already decided I belonged to him and was simply waiting for me to reach the same conclusion. The other hand remained at the base of my neck, his fingers threading through my hair, tilting my face up to his. "Tell me to stop," he said softly, his lips brushing my temple, my cheekbone, the corner of my mouth. "Tell me this was just a dare and you want to collect your money and disappear." I should have. Every ounce of logic I possessed screamed at me to step away, to reclaim my safe, controlled existence before I fell too far into whatever this was. But I'd spent 26 years being logical, being safe, being the woman who never lost control, and for the first time in my carefully curated life, I loved the feeling of falling. "Evelyn." He said my name like he was tasting it, rolling it across his tongue the way he'd rolled expensive scotch moments before our world had tilted sideways. "Say it again." "What?" I barely recognized my own voice, breathless and unsteady. "Your name." His thumb traced the line of my jaw with devastating precision, tilting my face up to his. "I want to hear you say it while I'm touching you." Heat flooded through me, champagne and desire, and something far more dangerous tangling in my bloodstream. "Evelyn Cross." "Evelyn Cross," he repeated, and somehow when he said it, my name sounded like a promise, like a claim already staked. "How old are you?" 26. "Married?" His eyes searched mine with predatory focus. "No." "Boyfriend?" "No." "Good." The word rumbled through his chest, satisfaction and possession wrapped in a single syllable. His hand remained at my waist, fingers spread wide like he was measuring how much of me he could hold. Because I don't share, Evelyn Cross. I should have been offended by the presumption. Should have reminded him we'd met 10 minutes ago, that one kiss didn't grant him ownership of anything, that I wasn't some prize to be claimed by dangerous men in expensive suits. Instead, my pulse hammered against his thumb, where it pressed against my throat, betraying every logical protest my mind tried to construct. You're trembling. Dante's voice dropped lower, intimate and dark, meant only for me despite the 100 people circulating around us. Are you afraid now? No, I whispered, and it was the truth. Fear would have been simpler, safer. This was something else entirely, something that made my skin feel too tight and my breath too shallow. Then what? He leaned closer, his mouth brushing my ear, sending shivers cascading down my spine. What are you feeling right now, Evelyn? Alive, reckless. Like I'd spent 26 years sleepwalking through a carefully color-coded existence, and he'd grabbed me by the wrist and dragged me into consciousness. Overwhelmed, I managed. Good. His hand slid from my waist to the small of my back, pulling me closer still, eliminating even the pretense of appropriate distance between strangers. You should be. Do you know why? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Because the moment you walked up to me in that beautiful dress, with champagne courage and reckless eyes, you became mine. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his dark eyes burning with intensity that made my knees weak. The instant your lips touched mine, you stopped being anonymous. You stopped being safe. You stopped belonging to that controlled, predictable life you've been hiding inside. My pulse thundered so loud I was certain everyone in the penthouse could hear it, a drumbeat of desire and terror and something I didn't have a name for. Dante's thumb remained pressed against my throat, feeling every frantic beat, reading my body's response like he'd written the manual himself. Your pulse is racing. His smile was knowing and devastating. Your breathing is shallow. You're leaning into me even though you know you should step away. He traced the line of my collarbone with one finger, leaving fire in its wake. Your body is telling me everything your mouth won't say, Evelyn. And what is it saying? The question emerged as barely a whisper. Dante's eyes darkened further, his mouth curving into something between a smile and a threat. That you're already mine. You just haven't admitted it yet. He was right. God help me. He was absolutely right. You still don't know who I am. Dante's voice remained low, intimate, but something had shifted in his tone. Something darker, more honest. Charlotte knows. That's why she tried to stop you. The mention of my friend's name broke through the haze of champagne and desire. I glanced across the room where Charlotte stood frozen, her face pale, her eyes wide with what looked distinctly like fear. Tell me, I whispered, though part of me wanted to remain in ignorance just a little longer. Dante's hand left my throat, and I immediately missed the warmth. He reached into his jacket and withdrew his phone, typed something with his thumb, then turned the screen toward me. A news article, 6 months old. Bellini family consolidates control. Dante Bellini assumes leadership of East Coast operations. The photo showed him in a darker suit, emerging from a courthouse, flanked by men in sunglasses, who looked like they'd been hired specifically to intimidate. The article mentioned words like organized crime, racketeering charges dismissed, alleged connections to, and most damning of all, Mafia. My breath caught. Still want to stay? His question held no judgment, only clinical assessment, like he was giving me one final chance to make the rational choice. I should leave. The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Yes. Dante pocketed his phone, his eyes never leaving mine. You should walk away right now. Go back to your friend. Collect your $300. Return to your safe life where the most dangerous thing you encounter is a missed deadline. He stepped closer, erasing the space I'd tried to create between us. But you won't. His hand curved around my waist again, possessive and certain. Do you know how I know? I shook my head. Because you didn't kiss me for $300, Evelyn. You kissed me because you've spent your entire life being careful, and you're desperate to know what it feels like to be reckless. You kissed me because safety is killing you slowly, and you'd rather risk everything than spend another day suffocating in that perfectly controlled existence. Every word landed like a knife between my ribs, sharp and precise and devastatingly accurate. I'm a dangerous man. His thumb traced circles against my hip bone through the silk of my dress. I've done things that would give you nightmares. I operate in worlds where violence is currency and loyalty is purchased with blood. People fear me for very good reasons. I know, I whispered, and you're staying anyway. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, a claim. Around us, the party continued, oblivious to the fact that my entire life was tilting on its axis. Charlotte had started moving through the crowd toward us, her expression desperate, probably planning some intervention to save me from myself. Dante noticed. Your friend is coming. She'll tell you I'm dangerous. She'll remind you that you don't belong in my world. She'll beg you to leave with her right now, while you still can. And if I stay? My voice emerged steadier than I felt. His smile was slow, predatory, absolutely devastating. Then you're mine, Evelyn Cross. Completely. No more safe choices, no more controlled existence. You step into my world, you accept everything that comes with it, the danger, the darkness, the fact that every enemy I have will see you as leverage the moment they realize what you mean to me. I should have been terrified, should have taken his warning and run. Instead, I met his dark eyes and made the most reckless decision of my carefully curated life. Then I'm staying. The moment the words left my mouth, something shifted in the atmosphere of the penthouse, like the entire room had been holding its breath, waiting to see what Dante Bellini would do with the woman foolish enough to kiss him. Now they had their answer. Dante's hand tightened on my waist, possessive and pleased, and he turned us slowly, deliberately, so everyone could see his arm around me, claiming me in front of witnesses, making a public declaration that I was under his protection or his ownership. I wasn't entirely sure there was a difference in his world. They're all watching, I whispered, suddenly hyper-aware of the weight of dozens of eyes, tracking our every movement. Good. Dante's mouth curved into something dark and satisfied. Let them watch. Let them see exactly who you belong to now. A woman in a crimson gown stood near the bar, her beauty sharp and calculated, her eyes fixed on me with undisguised hatred. Another across the room whispered something to her companion, both of them assessing me like I was a curiosity in a museum they couldn't quite understand. Designer dresses and perfect makeup and venom barely concealed behind champagne smiles. Who are they? I asked. Women who want what you have. Dante's voice held no sympathy for them. Women who understood the power that comes with being mine, but lacked the courage to walk up to me the way you did. Charlotte finally reached us, her face flushed, her grip on my arm desperate when she pulled me aside. Evelyn, please. We need to leave. Right now. Charlotte, do you have any idea what you've just done? Her voice dropped to an urgent whisper, her eyes darting to Dante, who stood a few feet away, giving us space but watching with predatory attention. You can't just kiss a man like that and walk away, but you also can't stay. He's dangerous. His enemies are dangerous. You're a civilian, Evelyn. You don't belong in this world. I know what he is, I said quietly. Then you know you just made yourself a target. Charlotte's nails dug into my arm. Every rival family, every person who wants to hurt him, they'll see you as leverage now, as a weakness they can exploit. The weight of her words settled over me like ice water, cutting through the champagne haze. I looked past her to where Dante stood and found him already watching me with those dark, knowing eyes. He'd heard every word Charlotte said. He knew exactly what he was offering me. Danger, protection, a target painted on my back in exchange for his attention. A man approached Dante, older, with silver at his temples and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. They spoke in low voices, the man's eyes flickering to me several times, Something in his expression made my skin prickle with unease. Dante's jaw tightened. He said something sharp in Italian, his tone leaving no room for argument. The man nodded and disappeared into the crowd. When Dante returned to my side, his hand found the small of my back immediately, but his expression had changed. Harder, more focused. "We're leaving," he said, not a suggestion. "What's wrong?" "You made an impression." His voice was controlled, but I heard the edge beneath it. "Marco Russo is here. He heads a rival family, and he just watched me claim you in front of 200 witnesses. You're not safe in a room that is exposed anymore." Fear spiked through me, sharp and cold. "I don't understand." "You do." Dante's eyes met mine, dark and serious. "You chose to stay, Evelyn. Now you live with what that means. And what that means is, you don't leave my sight until I know you're protected." Charlotte had been right. I'd just become a piece on a chessboard I barely understood, in a game where the stakes were measured in blood. Dante's hand remained firm against the small of my back as he guided me through the crowd, his body angled to shield me from view. People parted for him automatically, their conversations dying as we passed, then resuming in urgent whispers once we'd moved beyond earshot. We bypassed the main elevator bank, heading instead to a private corridor I hadn't noticed before. He pressed his thumb to a biometric scanner, and a concealed door slid open, revealing a private elevator with mirrored walls and soft lighting. The moment the doors closed behind us, sealing out the party and the watching eyes and the weight of danger I'd only just begun to understand, I felt like I could breathe again. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded small in the enclosed space. "My penthouse." Dante turned to face me, his expression softening slightly now that we were alone. "Top floor, private, safe." The elevator began its ascent, smooth and silent. "I should tell Charlotte, already handled." He held up his phone briefly. "My driver will take her home. She'll receive a text from your number in approximately 3 minutes explaining you left with me willingly." "You thought of everything." "I always do." His eyes darkened as he stepped closer, backing me against the mirrored wall. "Especially when it involves keeping what's mine protected." The elevator opened directly into his penthouse, and I forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 walls, the city sprawling below us like scattered diamonds on black velvet. The space was masculine and refined, dark leather, rich wood, steel accents that caught the ambient light. But it was the view that stole my focus, the world reduced to glittering lights and endless sky. Dante shrugged out of his light blue jacket, draping it over a chair with casual elegance, then moved to a bar cart stocked with bottles that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Wine?" "Yes." I needed something to steady my nerves, to ground me in this surreal moment. He poured 2 glasses of red that looked like liquid rubies in the low light, then crossed to where I stood frozen by the windows. He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine, sending electricity racing up my arm. "To reckless decisions," he said, his voice low and intimate. "To dangerous men in expensive suits," I countered, surprising myself. His smile was genuine this time, warm and devastating. We drank, the wine rich and complex, tasting like dark cherries and something I couldn't name. Dante set his glass down and moved behind me, his chest nearly touching my back, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. We stood like that, watching the city breathe below us, and for the first time since I'd kissed him, the urgency faded into something slower, more deliberate. "Tell me something true, Evelyn." His breath warmed my neck, sending shivers cascading down my spine. "Something you've never told anyone." "I've been living half a life," I whispered. "Going through motions, checking boxes, pretending that safe and comfortable were the same as happy." His hands slid down my arms, slow and reverent, leaving heat in their wake. "And now?" "Now I feel alive." I turned in his embrace, meeting those dark eyes that saw too much. Terrified, but alive. Dante's hand cupped my face with surprising gentleness, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. The terror means you understand the stakes. The alive means you're exactly where you're supposed to be. He kissed me then, soft and slow, nothing like the consuming fire at the party. This was exploration, savoring, a promise of patience and time we hadn't had before. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer until no space existed between us. The city disappeared. The danger disappeared. The world narrowed to his mouth on mine, his hands learning the curves of my body. The solid warmth of him surrounding me, like safety and sin combined. Nothing existed except this moment, this man, this choice I'd made. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city bathed in the soft gold of early morning. For a disoriented moment, I couldn't place where I was. The sheets were too expensive, the mattress too perfect, the view too impossibly beautiful. Then I felt the weight of an arm draped across my waist, the warmth of a body behind mine, and memory crashed back in waves. The dare, the kiss, the choice. Dante. I'd fallen asleep in his penthouse, wrapped in his arms, still wearing my blush pink dress because neither of us had wanted to break the spell long enough to find something else. We'd spent hours on his terrace, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. My childhood in Connecticut, his complicated relationship with family legacy, my dreams of financial independence, his cynicism about loyalty and trust. He'd kissed me until the city lights blurred and my knees went weak, but he hadn't pushed for more. Hadn't assumed that staying meant surrendering everything at once. "You're awake." His voice was rough with sleep, his accent thicker in the morning. His arm tightened around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. "I can feel you thinking." "Is that allowed?" I tried for lightness, but my voice betrayed me. "Depends what you're thinking about." His lips found the curve of my neck, soft and warm. "Running?" The word hung between us, heavy with truth. Yes, I was thinking about running. About returning to my safe apartment with its color-coded calendar and meal-prepped containers, and predictable existence where the most dangerous thing I encountered was a passive-aggressive email from accounting. "I should," I whispered, "but you won't." Not a question. A certainty that somehow hurt more than if he'd been asking. I turned in his arms to face him. Morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, softened the hard edges, made him look almost vulnerable. His dark hair was mussed from sleep, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and those midnight eyes watched me with an intensity that made my heart stutter. "You don't know that." "I do." His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my lower lip with devastating gentleness. "Because if you were going to run, Evelyn, you would have done it last night when Charlotte begged you to leave, or when I told you what I was, or when you realized being mine means carrying a target." Maybe I'm a slow learner. His smile was soft, almost sad. Or maybe you've spent so long being careful that you've forgotten how to listen to what you actually want. The words landed like truth between my ribs. I wanted to argue, to prove him wrong, but every protest died on my tongue because he was right. God, he was always right about me. "What if what I want is dangerous?" My voice came out smaller than intended. "Then you're finally being honest." He pulled me closer, eliminating any space between us. "What do you want, Evelyn? Right now, at this moment, what does your heart want?" "You." The admission escaped before I could stop it, raw and true. "I want you." And that terrifies me. Dante's eyes darkened, something fierce and possessive flickering in their depths. "Then stop fighting it." "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." He shifted, rolling us so I was beneath him, his weight pressing me into expensive sheets, his hands framing my face with careful intensity. "You want me. I want you. Everything else is just noise. Everything else is danger and violence and rival families who see me as leverage. Everything else is my problem to handle." His voice turned hard, absolute. "You think I claimed you last night without considering the consequences? You think I pulled you into my world without a plan to keep you safe?" I hadn't thought about it, hadn't considered that his possessiveness might come with actual protection. "Evelyn." He forced me to meet his eyes. "I don't do temporary. I don't claim women for a night and release them when morning comes. When I said you were mine, I meant permanently. completely. Which means everything I have, every resource, every man loyal to me, they all stand between you and anything that wants to hurt you. You barely know me. I know enough. His thumb traced my cheekbone with devastating tenderness. I know you've been suffocating in safety, desperate for something real. I know you walked up to the most dangerous man in that room because you were tired of living half a life. I know your pulse races when I touch you, and you lean into me, even when you know you shouldn't. That's not knowing me. That's observing reactions. Then stay. The word was both command and plea. Stay and let me know everything. Every fear, every dream, every secret you've kept locked away in that carefully controlled life. Stay, and let me show you what it means to be protected by someone who would burn the world down before letting it touch you. The thought of running hurt worse than the thought of staying. That's how I knew I was already lost. Dante sat up, the morning light catching the tattoos that disappeared beneath the collar of his white dress shirt, wrinkled now from sleep. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, typed something quickly, then set it aside and turned his full attention back to me. I'm going to make this very clear, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority I'd heard him use with his men at the party. So there's no confusion about what I'm offering and what I expect in return. I pulled myself up against the headboard, suddenly very aware that we were negotiating terms for something I didn't fully understand yet. I'm listening. You stay. You move into this penthouse by the end of the week. You quit your job. I'll handle your finances, your expenses, everything you need. He held up a hand when I started to protest. Let me finish. You'll have a driver, security when you leave the building, your own credit cards, your own accounts. I'm not putting you in a cage, Evelyn. I'm putting you under protection. That sounds exactly like a cage. A cage would be telling you where you can go and who you can see. This is me ensuring that when you go anywhere, you come back alive. His eyes were hard, serious. My enemies will test me. They'll want to see if you're a weakness they can exploit. The only way to prove you're not is to make it impossible for them to reach you. My hands trembled slightly. This was real, not romance novel fantasy or champagne-fueled recklessness. This was a man offering me protection because the alternative was genuine danger. And in return, my voice was steadier than I felt. In return, you're mine, completely, exclusively. You don't date other men. You don't kiss other men. You don't give anyone else the access you've given me. His hand found my jaw, tilting my face up to his. You wear my claim like armor, and you trust that I'll keep you safe. 24 hours ago, I'd been a woman who planned everything, who never took risks, who lived life from the safety of spreadsheets and sensible choices. 24 hours ago, I'd accepted a dare to prove I wasn't predictable. Now I was sitting in a mafia boss's bed, negotiating terms for a life I never could have imagined, and the terrifying part was how much I wanted it. I have conditions, I said, surprised by my own boldness. Dante's eyebrow raised, but something like respect flickered in his eyes. I'm listening. I keep my phone. I call my friends when I want. Charlotte gets to visit, and you don't intimidate her or make her feel unwelcome. I held his gaze, refusing to back down. And if I ask you a question about your world, you answer honestly. I can't navigate darkness if you keep me blind. Agreed. No hesitation. Anything else? If I say I need space, you give it to me. Protection doesn't mean possession of my every breath. His smile was slow, dangerous, and proud. You're negotiating with a man who could simply take what he wants, and you're doing it like you hold all the power. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I'm hoping it's why you want me. It's part of it. He leaned in, his mouth hovering just above mine. The other part is that you kissed me first. You walked into danger wearing borrowed confidence and champagne courage, and you chose me before you knew what that choice meant. That kind of bravery deserves protection, deserves everything I can give. So we have a deal? I whispered against his lips. We have more than a deal, Evelyn. Dante's hand slid into my hair, his grip possessive but gentle. We have a future, dangerous and complicated and absolutely nothing like the safe life you left behind. I know. and you're choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. The distinction felt important. Not just your world or your protection or your wealth. I'm choosing the man who saw through my careful control and called me brave for walking toward danger instead of away from it. His kiss was fire and promise, consuming and reverent all at once. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that looked almost like vulnerability. "Move in Friday," he said. "I'll have everything arranged. Your apartment cleared, your things brought here, your security briefed on your routines." "That's 3 days away." "I know. It's the longest I'm willing to wait to have you here permanently." His thumb traced my lower lip. 3 days for you to be certain. To walk away if you're going to. After Friday, you're mine completely, and I don't let go of what's mine. I should have asked for more time. Should have insisted on a trial period or an escape clause or any of the careful planning that had defined my entire life before this moment. Instead, I kissed him back and whispered against his mouth, "Friday." 3 days later, I stood in Dante Bellini's penthouse, surrounded by boxes containing my carefully curated life, watching the sunset over a city that looked different from this height. Charlotte had helped me pack, crying and hugging me, and making me promise to call every day. "You're insane," she'd said, but there was reluctant admiration in her eyes. Completely insane. But also, "I've never seen you look this alive." Dante appeared behind me, his arms circling my waist, pulling me back against his chest. "Regrets?" "Hundreds." I leaned into him, watching our reflection in the window, a woman in casual clothes standing in the arms of a man who commanded empires built on danger and loyalty. "But leaving isn't one of them." "Good." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Because this is just the beginning, Evelyn Cross. Your safe life ended the moment you kissed me on a dare. Now we build something new, something fierce." I turned in his arms, meeting those dark eyes that saw everything I'd ever hidden. "Not a dare anymore." "No," he agreed, his smile devastating and warm and absolutely certain. "Now it's a choice, a future, a life we build together, one dangerous, beautiful day at a time." And as he kissed me with the city glittering behind us, and the future stretching out, uncertain and thrilling, and absolutely nothing like the carefully planned existence I'd left behind, I realized something crucial. I'd walked into that party to prove I wasn't predictable. I'd left it claimed by a man who saw my hunger for something real and offered me everything: protection, passion, danger, and devotion wrapped in expensive suits and dark promises. The dare was over, but the fire we'd ignited was just beginning to burn.